One of the biggest mistakes that I see people make when it comes to Roth IRA conversions is not knowing how much to convert, or really, even if you should be converting at all. I see mistakes on both sides. I see sometimes where people aren't converting at all and probably should. And then I see on the other side where people are converting too much. So let's break this down in this video, and let me share my screen here with you and we'll walk through this. So this is just a sample couple that I made up. They're both 58 years old. They're both making $120,000 a year, and they're planning to work until they're 65 years old. Okay, so you can see right here, they're 58 and they're working, so their income is good right now, and they're paying a good amount in taxes, of course, as a result of that. Now, their plan by default is that they want to retire at 65, and then when they do, well, based upon the withdrawal strategy that they are thinking about, this sample couple here, which I'll call Jack and Jill sample, their taxes are going to drop considerably. Okay, a lot. And in fact, I'll show you right here in the details. You can see that once they retire, their total federal taxes paid, for instance, are $1,400 here their first year. All right, it goes up a little bit, but it doesn't even reach 2,000 in total federal taxes. Now, this couple that I have here is in California, but I'm just which of course has California state tax, but we're just looking at federal taxes here for this purpose. So their taxes would be extremely low, but the issue here is that over time their taxes would start to rise considerably right here. And let's go back over here for a second. So you can see that right here. By the time they hit age 75, which is the age when you have to start taking required minimum distributions, their taxes go from about $1,900 for the year to about $32,000 for the year. And they continue to rise tremendously there on out. Now, what's also interesting for you to see right here is that even when I'm assuming that Jack passes away at age 90 and that Jill lives to age 95, those taxes are still very high. In fact, they continue to grow. That's even though Jane is now living on one Social Security check because he's now passed away, but the taxes are still real high because she's now having to file as a single person. So this situation can get even worse if you have one spouse pass away even earlier, but we're not going to get into all that here today. What I do want to show you now is where there's some opportunities perhaps for conversions versus maybe where there's opportunities to do too much conversions. Okay, so I think that's proper English, right? Too much conversions. There we go. So all right, let's take a peek. So here's our situation, right? So by default, what they are assuming that they're going to do is they are going to withdraw money from their taxable accounts first in retirement. And then after they deplete their taxable accounts, then they're going to tap into their tax deferred monies like their IRAs, 401ks, okay, in that order. Instead of doing any sort of blending strategy, maybe where you're taking some money from one, other money from others, and try to, take advantage of maxing out maybe the 10% or 12% tax bracket, that sort of thing. This couple's paying very, very little in taxes. They're not even taking advantage of the 10% tax bracket. In other words, remember, the money that's in your IRAs, your pre-tax retirement accounts, this is going to be subject to tax eventually once you have to start taking the required minimum distributions. But you want to start getting in control, right, over when you're going to pay those taxes. So let's take a look, for instance, if they were to just fill up the 10% tax bracket. So if they were to do that, just convert just enough in years where they could still stay within that 10% bracket, they could do that and it'll end up improving their position by 57,000. So in other words, at their life expectancy, it is assumed or projected, I should say, that they would have a $57,000 more of tax adjusted ending portfolio value. Okay. And if they just converted that 10%, We can take a peek right here to see what that means as far as when they would be doing those conversions. And there's a little bit of opportunity here between ages 65 and 74. Again, 65 is when they're planning to retire, and then 75 is when they have to start taking out their required minimum distributions. Now, I would suggest that we take a look here, of course, at the 12% bracket, because that's not too much more. And take a look at this. If we convert up and use up that 12% bracket, that puts them in a much better position. Now we're looking at a $459,000 more of tax adjusted ending portfolio value at their life expectancy. And by doing that, let's take a look over here. We could see the conversions are going up, the amount that we have to convert here. But still, the conversions are only going to be done in that window of opportunity, I like to call it oftentimes, which is between when they're going to retire and when they have to start taking out their required minimum distributions. Now, let's take a look next at the 22% bracket. And by the way, you might be wondering what this 15% is. After 2025, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is going to sunset. So the 12% bracket is going to become the 15. So if they were to fill up the 22% bracket, it does improve their situation, but not by a lot more than if they were to just convert up to the 12%, right? So notice this. At 22%, this is called this 498,000. At 12%, that was 459,000. So they may not want to convert. It may be preferable just to, only convert up to that 12% instead. Now, let's go over here to the 24 and see what happens. Now, notice this. If they converted up to the 24%, now it's putting them in a worse position. I mean, it's better than no conversions at all, but it's actually a worse situation than if they were to convert up to the 12% bracket. Okay. Now, let's go to the 24. Or not to the 24, to the 32, I mean. Now, look at this. Now we're going in a situation where they're going to have even less money, or less tax adjusted ending portfolio value at retirement. And the issue, or not at retirement, at life expectancy. And the issue is, the reason why we're seeing this is, in order to fill up this bracket, they're having to pay taxes at a much higher rate much earlier on. I mean, yeah, it's nice later on, they're paying very little in taxes. But if they were to do this, take a look right here. If they were to do this, they're having to pay a lot in taxes over the course of the next 6 years. Now, again, over time, they're paying nothing in income taxes here. And they're only in this, 10% bracket. And the reality is that, they could be withdrawing some more money from their IRA in these later years here and still not have to pay taxes. They've shifted all their money, I believe. Let's take a look in this scenario. Yes, all their money at this time by the year 2028, let's go right here, is out of the tax deferred account. All of it is now either in the tax free, the Roth IRA, and some of it's still in the taxable account that they had as well. So they're going to pay nothing in income taxes. They're not even taking advantage of the standard deduction. And so this is a prime example of converting too much. So it's really important, to kind of, think about this as we want to smooth this out. So let's go back to the 12. I like the 12 here. See how this is being smoothed out considerably. Now the 22, which does improve it a little bit, would look something like this. Okay. So it's really important to understand really how this works as far as where you are within the brackets, what's your overall withdrawal strategy. This Roth conversions is just one component. As I had mentioned earlier, sometimes it doesn't even make sense to do Roth conversions. Sometimes it just makes sense to say, hey, we're going to take a certain amount from our IRA and we're going to take a certain amount from our Roth IRA. And by doing that, perhaps that's going to keep us in the 12% tax bracket or wherever you are within your tax brackets, right? Sometimes that's the wise thing to do. So it's always a case-by-case basis. Hope this helps. And if it did, make sure that you like the video, make sure that you subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.